Next up, the Paladin. Boy oh boy. Now, when Muster for Battle was coming out, I was looking at the card and was like, you get 3 1/1 tokens, and you also get a 1/4 Light's Justice for 3 mana. I guess that's pretty value. But now that I see this card, I understand what that was basically supposed to be, and that's to turn Paladin into Token Paladin, a lot like Token Druid. If you are running Muster for Battle, you get a lot of 1/1 tokens on the board. You can also use your hero power. If those guys survive at all, you can play the Quartermaster for 5 mana to buff up those recruits. Now, the downside is he only has 2 attack, which is really weak for 5 mana. But as a Paladin, if you can get enough 1/1 tokens on the board, which isn't too hard to do as a Paladin, because you basically have an infinite generator for them as a button, and you also have Muster for Battle, then that could make Token Paladin actually kind of scary. Imagine having 4 tokens on the board that were 1/1 silver hands, and then all of a sudden they become 3/3s. Yeah, you could put on a lot of pressure to your opponent if they don't have taunts set up for that. And I'm starting to kind of see how a more aggressive Paladin deck could maybe run in the expansion. Cards like this, cards like the Scarlet Purifier, which is super anti-death rattle, the Muster for Battle, and the Bolvar 4-Dragon, the new legendary, which benefits from the more guys die on your field, the more powerful it will get in your hand. And then when you play it, it's played instead of as 1/1, possibly as like a 5/7. Instead of a 1/1. 1/7. Its base stats are 1/7. Jeez. And then it buffs up by +1 every time a friendly minion dies on your field. And I could see that running with Quartermaster, with Muster for Battle, with the Silver Hand Recruits, and yeah, those kinds of cards. Possibly. Scarlet Purifier, also a good choice for that. Anyway, moving on. Next card, the Seal of Light, which is a 2-mana spell, kind of the equivalent of a warrior's, what's it called? Heroic Strike. Heroic Strike, of course, for 2 mana, gives your hero +4 attack for 1 turn, whereas this card gives your hero 5 health, or 4 health restored, and +2 attack for the turn. I think, generally speaking, this might be the slightly stronger version of Heroic Strike. Excuse me. Actually, you know, it's situationally better. If you really need the health and you want to still remove a guy, it could be useful. Same with Heroic Strike, though. If you need to remove a guy really badly, it can kill a guy with 1 attack and 1 turn, but yeah, it's probably actually a weak card, too. Heroic Strike was never that good. Seal of Light, probably not that strong as well. If you're playing it with Muster for Battle, you could do a 3-attack swing, which might be nice. As far as a face Paladin goes, yeah, the thing about that is that if you're playing a face Paladin, you probably don't need to restore health to your hero that badly. So, you know, actually, on second thought, this card might see less use than Heroic Strike even. At least Heroic Strike could be used in a face warrior. And maybe there'll be a use for this card. Gadget Saiyan Auctioneer, maybe? Meh. It's not great. Next up, the Shielded Minibot. Now, this is a 2/2 with Divine Shield. It's also a mech. It's similar to that Argent Protector, which gives gives any minion on your board that's already on the field a Divine Shield as a battle cry. This guy just comes out with the Divine Shield on him. I kind of lean towards maybe this being the better card, because A, you don't have to have a minion on the board to get that Divine Shield, and B, you don't have to waste your Divine Shield on a 1/1 Silverhand Recruit. And 3, it's also a mech, so if you're playing a mech synergy deck, then yeah, the Shielded Minibot would be pretty good. I don't know if it's probably not good enough to run in a constructed deck that's not running mechs, but in mechs I could definitely see it. As far as Arena goes, yeah, I'd say it's a good 2-drop. You're able to trade with any other 2-drop and keep it alive. Divine Shield is a strong effect in Arena. So yeah, I'd say good in Arena. Playable in mechs for constructed. Now, to the Priests. Vol'jin, I covered that card as well. Vol'jin. The thing about it is, you look at it and you say, hey, it has 6 attack, 2 health for 5 mana, that's crappy stats. But you gotta keep in mind it's Battlecry. It allows you to swap health with any other minion on the board. And that could include an opponent's Giant, which means you'll really be playing this as a 6/8, and -6, or deal 6 damage to the enemy Giant, which would be very good. If there's no good targets on the board, then this card isn't nearly as strong, and you definitely don't want to play it on an empty field. But it's situationally good. It's a reactive card, as many priest cards are. I think in general it's actually very strong. If you buff it up to a 6/6 or a 6/8, it might force removal out of your opponent in a control deck. And even in a more aggressive priest deck, I could see it, now that I think about it, because your opponent tries to put a huge taunt in your way and you steal all of its health. And Vol'jin still has a ton of attack as well. So it would let your weak guys get through easier to your opponent's face. And speaking of Shadow Priests, I think it might be getting a few more options here, because the next card we're going to talk about is the Shadow Boxer. This card I like a lot. It's a 2/3 mech. I think it's pretty good, even the fact that it's not a mech, though, because its effect is that whenever a character is healed, you deal 1 damage to a random enemy, which would have great synergy with cards like Circle of Healing. It's good with just the hero power in general. That means your hero power is now heal 2 and then deal 1 damage to a random enemy. Its stats are just fine for a 2-drop, 2/3, maybe not as ideal as a 3/2, but I think it's perfectly acceptable given its effect. And if you're running a mech priest deck, then I think this card will definitely make the cut, because mech synergy just makes any mech card slightly better than it already was. I think it's a solid card. I expect to see some people playing it in Constructed, and even in Arena I'd say it's a good pick. That effect is really strong, and getting extra damage for free is never a bad thing in Arena. So next up we have the Shadow Bomber, which, when you play it, as a 2/1 for 1, it deals 3 damage to both heroes. Obviously this is meant for an aggressive priest deck. I don't know if that's going to be a super viable thing, but it would be awesome to actually be able to use Shadow Form and maybe Mind Blast for lulz. It could work. It could catch people off guard. I could see Vol'jin, Shadow Boxer, Shadow Bomber. Would you even run Shadow Form though? I don't think you could run Shadow Form though, because it's too slow of a card. You have to pay 3 mana to even swap your hero power around, and it doesn't do anything when you play it. But, yeah, it would only be run in an aggressive priest deck, obviously. Hopefully that'll be a thing one day. Next up, the Light of the Naru, which is a card I like a lot. You restore 3 health to a ally, or any target, really, including yourself. And if the target is still damaged after you heal them, you summon a Light Warden, which, of course, is the 1/2 that whenever a target is healed on the field, including champions, it gets +2 attack permanently. Now, I imagine that the 3 health restores before the Light Warden. That's what the text would imply there. So that probably means that the Light Warden does not benefit from the heal coming out as a 3/2. But being able to heal for 3 health and get a free 1/2 Light Warden on the field is pretty good value for 1 mana. It's probably about the only time you'll see Light Warden really played, is if it's an after effect of this card. I think it's reasonable. I could see it certainly in something like a Shadow Boxer deck, maybe the aggressive priest decks I was talking about. And it'll be interesting to see. 1 mana spells, usually not that great, but I think this one might be worth a try. Power Word Shield, of course, being the exception in priest. Next up, Light Bomb. This card is kind of crazy. It's, if you want to blow stuff up, especially giants, Light Bomb is the card for that. It deals damage to each minion equal to its attack. I thought that the new Warrior Epic Crush would do something like this, but I was slightly off on that. So, Light Bomb, it's great against minions that have high attack, low health, or already injured, and really bad to play if your field is not composed of low attack, high health minions. But the thing about Priest is that frequently they do have lots of value minions that could survive a Light Bomb pretty easily. Well, Chillwind Yeti, for example, might be a card you could run in Priest, although it's kind of out of the meta right now. But it has more attack, more health than it has attack, so it would survive a Light Bomb. You don't want to play this if you're playing Giants, but what Priest really runs Giants anyway? It's a niche card for certain decks, but it could be very strong removal in certain circumstances. It's also great if you have an empty board and your opponent is just dumping everything on you, which means it would be pretty good for Arena mode, actually. Because in Arena mode that tends to happen, your opponent gets ahead, and then they just keep playing stuff, and and they wouldn't really see a light bomb coming out of a priest the same way that they would expect a flame strike out of a mage. So I could see it being drafted for for arena mode and being pretty good. In constructed, it depends on what deck you're playing, but if you're not playing a lot of minions or your minions have low attack, then it could be good. Overall, a reasonable card. Situational, but reasonable. I could see it being played. Okay, next up, the Rogue. Now, I did cover the Trade Prince Gallywix before, but to go over it briefly, I think it's a very, very strong card. First off, its stats are amazing. You have 5 attack, 8 health for 6 mana, which is a great stat lineup. And then in addition, it's kind of a combination between a Gadget Sand Auctioneer and a Lore Walker Cho, in that whenever your opponent casts a spell, you gain a copy of the spell that they just played, and all you give them in return is a coin. Now, you don't want to play this against a Miracle Rogue that has a Gadget Sand Auctioneer on the field, because they'll use that coin to destroy you. But, well, for one thing, Gadget Sand got nerfed to 6 mana, so you won't see as many of them. And secondly, that's not going to happen too often in the first place. Giving them a coin in exchange for one of their spells is a huge trade-up for you. If you're getting a Fireball, or you're getting some Hexes or direct removal, that's going to be really, really good for you. It forces your opponent to either have to remove Trade Prince Gallywix immediately, or not play spells, basically. And if you have cards like Conceal in your deck to protect Trade Prince Gallywix, then that's going to give your opponent some trouble. Maybe you would combine this with Loatheb, like turn 5 Loatheb, turn 6 Trade Prince Gallywix, and that could screw over a lot of spell-based decks. I think he'll be run in a lot of rogue decks. I think he's really, really good. Next up, Tinker's Sharp Sword Oil. It's a 4 mana rogue common spell, and when I looked at this card, I thought it was pretty strong. It gives your weapon plus 3 attack, which would be great for an Assassin's Blade, buffing it up to 6 attack. Deadly Poison has always been good, and people already know that. But 3 attack is not too bad. Of course, for 4 mana, you really want to get the combo effect off, and that's to also give a friendly minion plus 3 attack. If you were to compare it to something like using Deadly Poison and then a Cold Blood, then you get about the same amount of effect. You're paying more mana, but the difference is card advantage, and you have them both in the same card. So, I think it's a reasonable card if you're playing a deck that likes to use a lot of weapons and is probably more aggressive. If something like a Backspace Rogue, if that ever came back into fruition, or just these aggro rogues that try to go for your opponent's face, buff a Assassin's Blade, buff a minion, put out tons of damage, I could see it being used. In arena mode, I think it could be decent. It depends on how many weapons you draft, really. Of course, you always have the rogue hero power, so it's never going to be useless. That's a reasonable card in arena. That's a reasonable card in constructed. It can be good in constructed if you're playing a certain kind of deck, and I think that deck is going to be an aggressive rogue. It's a cool card. I like it overall. Next up, the Cogmaster's Wrench. I'm not really sure why they made this a rogue card, but hey, it's a 1/3 rogue weapon, which is awful stats, comes out with 3 mana. The reason you would play this is if you have mechs in your deck, so if you're running rogue mechs, then it actually comes out as a 3/3 weapon for 3 mana, which is perfectly reasonable. That means you can kill 3 dudes with it. So it's good if you're running a heavy or pure mech deck and trash otherwise. Not too much to say about that. Probably awful in arena because you're just not going to be able to draft enough mechs to really make this justifiable, I believe. But hey, in constructed mech decks, yeah, you run it in mech decks. That's about it. Next up, One-Eyed Cheat, which is very interesting. It is, I believe, the only 2-drop with 4 attack and 1 health. Now, you might be thinking, oh great, another Magma Rager. And that's not totally unjustified. The only thing that saves it from being another crappy Magma Rager is that if you play a pirate on the back of this guy, then he gains stealth. So if your opponent doesn't have an AoE, they can't actually kill this guy, and you can actually use him to push for damage. So in an aggressive pirate rogue deck, maybe he could be useful. If you basically have to be able to stealth him, or I don't think he's worth playing at all. He could be pretty weak either way. It depends how good pirate decks are this expansion, and they are adding new pirate cards in aside from this guy. So you might see him in pirates, that's it. Will Rogue Pirate be the new aggressive rogue deck in combination with Tinker's Sharp Sword Oil? Who knows? It's hard to say at this point. I do definitely think that pirates could become a thing, though, and there's a card we'll get to later. It's in the neutral section.